I want to welcome everybody. I'm Barb Jacobson, and I have an evening group. Tonight we'll meet. But anyway, Callie never gets introduced on the first day. And so I'm here to introduce her, but I forgot to talk to her this morning, so I have no clue what's going on. She is married to Bob. She just lives over here, and I always say, Callie has a front door that goes like this. It's revolving. Because there's always somebody living with her. Yeah, that's true. How many grandchildren? 5? 7. See, I knew. Anyway, Callie, we love you and thank you, and go for it.
Okay. So before I actually begin, we have an announcement. If you are a plant person, out on the table next to the office, there's a bunch, I don't know how many. There are some Christmas cactuses that need a new home. So if you would like Christmas cactus, I think they will be red. And the ones that I have bloom multi-times a year, so they're very fun. But we're doing Romans this year. And we who are speakers have been writing the lessons and working very hard for months. So we're really, really excited to do this together. Last year we tried something new, and we put the evaluations in the back of the book. And lo and behold, you guys filled them out a whole lot better than you ever did when we handed them to you. So, based on that, we are making some changes. We are trying some experiments this year. One of them has to do with time. So, we start at 9 o'clock, but we're going back to the pattern we had pre-COVID, where before, from like 8:45 to 9, there will be coffee and snacks over in the Hall of Faith. So you can come and gather and chit-chat and make connections, and then, in a timely fashion, go to your room by 9. That way, it gives us a little bit more just chit-chat fellowship with people that aren't necessarily in your group. We're also giving more time to the small groups, so that there will be more time to both wrestle with Paul together as we discuss the lessons and build strong community within your group. To do that, we are shortening the talks. So instead of having a half-hour talk, we will have a 20-minute talk. A little traumatic for us who are talking and looking at long sections of Romans and thinking, okay, we can do this. But a lot easier for you who only have to listen to us for 20 minutes. In the book, we also will have a Hear Journal, and you'll be hearing more about that in the small group. That was something that Laura did in the summer program that was really, really well received. So we are shifting up how we are doing the review for y'all who've been here a long time. So instead of having review questions just at one point in time, you're going to write something each week in that review section and then discuss the fullness of that when we gather at our reviews. The other thing is we're not starting with Romans 1 next week. So you're going to get like an overview of Romans, and you're going to think, why are we not doing Romans 1? Well, here's the reason. It's all because Thanksgiving is poorly placed. We have a very late Thanksgiving, and usually, we have a lesson in November, we break for Thanksgiving, and if it's an early Thanksgiving, we come back and do a lesson, and then we have the break, and we have our Christmas brunch. Well, this year it's late enough that we'll go straight from Thanksgiving to the Christmas brunch. And the way that the natural flow of laying the lessons out, we would have begun the first part of Romans 8 in November and the second part of Romans 8 in January. And this was just a very bad plan. So we stuck in a beginning lesson at the first so that we can have all of Romans 8 together in January. So it looks a little odd. It's very logical. There's a lot of stuff, in the back of our books. We have a very full appendix this time. There's a memory verse page. So instead of having random highlighted verses on the top of the lessons, there's a page that has all of the memory verses there. So you individually or you as a group can work on that. And it will be the places where Laura will be writing music for some of them. There is a glossary, because sometimes there is a theological kind of word that you might hit and think, what actually does that mean? And some of them are words we use all the time, but if we really got pushed to define, it might be a little bumpy. So we have a glossary. We have a book. Pastor Dave made this, a chart. Pastor Dave made this up for us. These are quotes from the Old Testament that Paul has used in Romans. This is a long list. So as we go through Romans, one of the things that we will be pondering is, why did Paul put that here? If he made the effort to pull forward some particular verse, it's because it makes a point he once made. So that's not just random interest. That's something that we will be pondering many, many weeks. There's also a section in the back that is from the book 3D Gospel by Jason Georges. And I'm going to talk a little bit about what's in that, what the book is. It was used with permission. He was very helpful. But one of the ways to look at culture is how they use time. How strict are they on rules? Are they a little like, are their rules suggestions? Are they hard and fast? A more basic way to look at culture is to look at what drives that culture. What are their motivations? And in the book, he talks about guilt and innocent cultures, honor and shame cultures, and fear and power cultures. Now, each one of these will weave through all cultures, but the proportions, how they flow together, will be different, and there'll always be one that is dominant. In Romans, Paul writes with a very tightly wound combination of all three of those. We are going to find all three of these going through Romans. But the Western culture that is our heritage has pretty much been dominated by one strand for a couple centuries, and that would be the guilt and innocent approach. That has been strengthened or has strengthened the individualistic approach that we have to life. In Bible times, the honor and shame was more strong, but instead of being all spread out, which they are a little bit in our day, they were wound a lot closer together, even though one was stronger. There's been a cultural shift in our country. I don't know if you've noticed that. But like there's many areas where there really isn't generally accepted sense of sin. That's just kind of not in their vocabulary. Well, if you only have the guilt and innocent strand, you got to first start by trying to prove to them they are sinners, because that's the foundation of how you share the gospel. But it's really not the only tool in our gospel. And in the back, where we have a little more detail about what each one of them is, we also have a gospel presentation through each branch, because I think it's very helpful to realize God approaches each culture. He is there for each culture, and as our culture shifts, we have a variety of ways to share the love of Jesus. Okay, so the guilt and innocent culture is the one that's going to be so common to us that it's a little surprising. There could be people looking at it any other way. Right and wrong is a foundational pillar. Society makes rules and laws, and if you break them, you've done something wrong. It should be very clear. Doing the right thing keeps you innocent, and doing the wrong thing makes you guilty. Government, schools, churches, even families kind of establish rules to guide social behavior. Now, in churches and families sometimes, those rules are assumed and maybe not even spoken. I think probably most of us have tripped over a rule somewhere along the line that we didn't even know it was a rule until we after had done it wrong and everybody reacted. It was like, ooh, didn't know that one. We are very individualistic. And in that system, we basically work to socialize people to here's the rules and here's how you should behave it. It comes from within an individual. C.S. Lewis said, integrity is doing the right thing even when nobody is looking. And that's kind of the core. And there's nothing wrong with that, by the way. We train our kids to think for yourself, to be true to yourself. And bowing to social pressure or blending in just really aren't very high priorities. But right now in our culture, while we do have very specific laws and rules, we also have many competing sets of moral values. So not legal things that you can check off, but what's the right way to deal with this issue or this issue or this issue? And pretty much people can choose. I want to live this way. I'm going to choose that one. I'm going to choose that one. And you look at gender issues. You look at women's and men's roles. You look at so many areas that cause chaos in our families and in our communities. And it's because we've got lots of choices. And the individual can pick whichever one they want. And we tend to look down on people who pick whatever we didn't. So our way is the right way, and clearly yours is the wrong way. And it causes a lot of chaos. Individualistic cultures also are focused around doing. We are very action-oriented. So what you do is how we evaluate you. And how often in conversations do we, somewhere trying to figure out and get to know each other a little bit, we say, what do you do? How do you fill your time? We do the same thing in our justice system. You are guilty because you've done something bad and you broke a rule. You can become unguilty by doing something good. That might be community service. That might be making restitution. That might be going to prison. But it's an action that will counterbalance the bad action that you did before. And to relieve yourself of feeling guilt, it usually takes confession, facing a potential discipline, and possibly making restitution. Now, in Bible times, the guilt and innocence strand, which existed, would have been anchored in the more dominant communal approach to life. But honestly, we have been individualized so long that it's really hard for us to even picture what it looks like within a strongly communal setting. One danger when we focus too much on our one strand is that sometimes God ends up looking like a rule giver and a judge. Now, he is the rule giver and he is the judge, but that is not the only way he presents himself. In fact, that's not the primary way he has introduced himself to people. And if that becomes a temptation for a person or for a group of people, then it's also easy to see the Bible as primarily being a book of rules or moral guidance. And it has that in it, but that's not its primary purpose either. That's not what it speaks of itself. But within that category, and we're going to look at all of these categories with this, one of the things that God is clearly seen in that setting is the holiness of God and the wisdom of God. Some of the words that show up for the guilt and innocent category is kind of courtroom language. And we are going to see these in Romans. So I'll read them off, and I'm sure you're going to remember the whole list. So when you find them in Romans, you'll say, law, condemnation, sacrifice, forgiveness, debt, justice, transgression, guilt, pardon, judgment, penalty, and justification. And that is a strand that Paul has woven into Romans. But another strand that is in Romans is honor and shame. Honor and shame cultures are much more group-oriented. It is about belonging to your group. It is about having a place, being accepted. Honor is when other people think good of you. And because of that, there's good relationships around you. Shame, on the other hand, is when people think poorly of you. And there is discord around you, and you might even be completely disconnected from your group. So honor and shame sort of function as a social credit rating of your reputation. And they are contagious. So if I do something that is shameful, my whole people are shamed. My family, my community group. Sometimes you will see when some team doesn't do well in the World Cup, and the whole nation goes into mourning because they're so embarrassed by their team. Okay, it's that. But honor is the same way. When someone does something that brings honor to themselves, it brings honor to all. Relational harmony is really important. So people strive to maintain those bonds. When facing choices, it's what will support my group? What will others think? And identity is based on who you are, not particularly on what you do, unless you are bringing shame. Managing shame is very different than managing guilt. And actually, shame is an issue that our culture doesn't exactly know what to do with, so we just sort of smush it and avoid a lot. But whereas you can control your own forgiveness, you can do things to earn forgiveness, if you will. Shame doesn't go away on your own. You really need others to remove the shame from you. We saw that in the prodigal son story, where the father reaches out and removes the shame from his son and stands between his son and the other people and says, "He is my son. He is welcome back." And the shame is removed, and he is part of the community and the family again. Jesus does this a lot. He bestows dignity and honor on the blind, the deaf, the lame, the lepers, bleeding women, demon-possessed, Gentiles. Those were all social outcasts that he brings back into the community and says, you belong in the kingdom of God. Shame and honor are growing in our culture, especially in the younger generations that are more impacted by social media, because social media is all about shame and honor. You are an influencer, and everybody thinks you're great. Something goes wrong, and everybody thinks you're terrible, and they post that all over your page. We've seen over the last couple months where famous influencers have ended up actually committing suicide because they didn't want to face things were going wrong, and they were losing their position, and it mattered that much to them. That's shame and honor. So understanding this a little bit more can help us navigate the differences as we who are not quite young look down and say, that makes no sense to me. And those who are younger look up at us and say, that makes no sense to me. This is where we go. The aspects of God which are seen most strongly in this are Father, Husband, Creator, Redeemer. It's all of those images that draw people in and say, you have a place here. And the honor words in the Bible, and we will see these in Romans, Father, child, family, inheritance, adoption, unity, Jew and Gentile, worthy, purity, clean and unclean, dishonor, approval, boasting. Those are all words that draw from this category. The fear and honor culture, in them, it's really not important what you believe about anything. That's not the primary thing that determines actions. Rather, it's practices that placate the powerful, which determine how you should be acting. In the religious setting, the powerful are often viewed as demons or spiritual beings. And the things that are done to placate might look totally arbitrary to somebody on the outside. But the purpose is to appease, to protect yourself, or to manipulate and get favor and advance. The religions where that is very strong shows up in the occult, astrology, witch doctor kind of settings, voodoo, animism. And the fundamental religious view, worldview that they have, is that this world is inhabited by spiritual beings that have power. So they look at the world as This is the seen world. You, me, buildings, that kind of stuff. There is unseen in this world, angels, spirits, curses, ancestors. And then there is unseen beyond this world, would be God, and heaven and hell, and that kind of idea. Now, notice they are right in that all three of those exist. There is a physical world. There is an unseen world that is in our level. Angels and demons are a thing. And clearly, there is God beyond that. So it's not that the worldview is exactly wrong, but it's misused. So instead of bowing to God as the most powerful, they have placed him beneath other spiritual forces and saying they are the most powerful. They are the ones that we have to placate. And they are the ones that they might turn to for prayer or sacrifice if there's disease or bad grades at school or somebody's dying or any number of other things that they say these caused. Whereas we know you go higher than that, right? You go up here because this God is higher than any other powers. But those powers exist. But for those in that category, disharmony with the spiritual forces can be very, very dangerous and very disastrous. In the secular world, and we see this more in our culture, at least we are more aware of it in our culture, that same fear-power dynamics can appear when power is misused against those who have less power or no power. Okay. So that can be what it's like being raised in an alcoholic family. You do not say, Dad is drunk on the couch, so no, he can't take the phone. You say, no, he has a meeting, he'll call you back later. And you don't think that's a lie, because it's what you need to do to survive. You tell the truth and you are in trouble, and you will have gotten your whole family into trouble. It's like that in abusive relationships, in abusive marriages. It's like that in unjust social settings, or under a boss or a parent who has major anger issues, when you just kind of never know which boss is going to show up that day. On a large scale, that same thing can be true where you have really powerful dictators that are not really concerned about the people, but more about themselves and their power. You get that under drug cartels. So the action between this secular setting and the religious settings might be different, but that sense of, I have no power and I have to figure out how to placate the powerful, determines what actions will be taken in both settings. Right becomes whatever protects you. And it has nothing to do with a rule or morality or integrity. So aspects of God that are real potent for these people, and we see in Scripture, are King, Lord of hosts, Adonai, which is Lord, Yahweh, Jehovah, which is Lord in all capitals, Almighty. It's the idea that it doesn't matter how powerful is the one that makes you feel weak. God is more powerful than them. And the words in that setting, it tends to be combat words. Deliverance, power, or powers. Throne, dark and light are that category. Freedom, triumph, kingdom, blessing and curse. Authority, deliver, wage war, prisoner, miracles, and peace. And we are going to see this run through Romans also, because Paul has created a tightly wound tale that speaks to all aspects of all cultures and gives us the fullest view of God and of us as people. But we're studying Romans, so we're going to watch one of the Bible Project's videos just to set us in a Romans mind, not just a cultural mind. This is the video that they made on how to read New Testament letters. But they used Romans as the example, so it's a great one to remind us how to study as we go into the study of Romans and also see it lived out in that book. Well, okay, it's not a book, it's a letter.
Of Jesus' followers throughout the ancient Roman Empire.
Letters? Like, I'm reading someone's mail.
Yeah. The letters are written by the apostles, that is, the people that Jesus appointed to spread the good news about his kingdom. And they wrote to Jesus' followers living in different cities around the Roman world. These letters were all written in a style called prose discourse.
Now, if I'm reading a letter that wasn't written to me, then there's likely a lot of background information that's assumed but not mentioned.
Yeah, exactly. And the letters in the Bible are no different.
Okay, so let's talk about how to read the New Testament letters in historical context.
So there are 3 levels of historical context to keep in mind when reading the New Testament letters. The first is how all the letters fit into the larger storyline of the scriptures.
Right, so this story begins with God creating humanity as his partners to rule creation with him. But we choose to rule on our own terms, leading to violence, exile, and death.
But God promises a guy named Abraham that life and blessing will spread to all nations through him and his descendants to renew God's vision for humanity.
And Jesus said he came to bring that promise to its fulfillment through his life, death, and resurrection.
Right, and so the apostles saw themselves as heralds, announcing the arrival of God's kingdom in Jesus. Like the apostle Paul. When he wrote to the house churches in Rome about the good news, he said his job was to summon people of all nations to give their allegiance to Jesus, the exalted King of the world.
That's a bold thing to say to people living in the capital city of the Roman Empire, whose allegiance is supposed to be to Caesar.
Yeah, and that actually brings us to the second important context for understanding the New Testament letters, the culture of the Roman Empire in the first century.
So Rome ruled all of these territories around the Mediterranean Sea.
And they built their empire by conquering and enslaving their enemies and then imposing heavy taxes. The emperor and his small circle controlled all of the power and wealth, and they knew how to deal with people who threatened the social order.
Most people lived without much money or stability.
And Roman culture had a very clear hierarchy. Men from important families with money and education could move ahead in society. But women, slaves, children, and the poor were always at a disadvantage and treated as inferior.
Yet, in a community of people who followed Jesus, everyone was treated with love and equal dignity.
Yeah, in Roman life, it was unheard of for people of high status to associate with people below them. But the apostles said that through Jesus, God had given the gift of his love to everyone without regard to their status.
So, in that context, these letters were countercultural, and they broke down barriers between people.
Exactly. And so that brings us to the last level of context, the situational context of each letter.
You mean the specific issues in the church of a city that prompted the writing of the letter in the first place?
Yeah, like Paul's letter to the Christians in Rome. It's tempting to read this letter and focus on all the important theology and then overlook why he wrote this letter.
Why did he write it?
Well, towards the end, he talks about how Jewish food laws and sacred days have become controversial between Jewish and non-Jewish followers of Jesus.
Which was creating divisions in the church.
And if you read carefully, you can see that some Christians with higher social status were treating Jewish followers of Jesus with contempt.
And Jewish Christians were returning the favor, condemning the non-Jews as second-rate followers of Jesus.
Exactly. And so all of the ideas and theology in the first part of the letter were crafted to address those very problems. Paul acknowledges that the Roman Christians have big differences in culture, theology, and social status, but he wants them to realize that they are unified by their faith in Jesus, who is the real center of their church.
Okay, great. But if that letter was written to someone else, then what should I get out of it? I mean, I don't live in ancient Rome.
Well, In these letters, we see the apostles challenging and transforming every part of their first century culture and life with the good news about King Jesus. And by watching them, we gain wisdom about how that same good news can transform our culture as well. Now, there's one more helpful step to take in reading the New Testament letters, and that's learning how to follow the flow of thought from the letter's beginning all the way to its end. And that's what we'll look at next.
But as speakers, when we were writing the lesson, that is one of the predominant things we looked at. What is he saying, and how does it flow, and what does it do? So this is an extremely collaborative book that you have, because we were all saying, okay, mine flows into yours. How do we want to do this? So we'll be practicing that, and you can go home and watch the video.